Hello, we're going to take 1 minute, wait for folks to get here, and then we will start our chat. Thank you all so much. Hello, everybody. We have my dear friend Wayne Halliburton on here. Wayne, show us your beautiful face. Oh no. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Sophie Marie. I'm a choreographer and writer, and this here YouTube channel is for mostly just discussing art, making art, all that kind of fun stuff. Tonight, Wayne and I are going to be chatting about being poor and making art and all the things that go with that. Really quick, I'm going to be putting into the chat throughout the night my personal Patreon as well as Wayne's Patreon and where you can find us on social media. Wayne, let me turn it over to you. Who are you?
Hello, my name is Wayne. I am a musician, an artist, and newly found taxidermist.
Yeah, you are.
I know.
Great. So this discussion is going to be a little bit different than last time. Last time was a little bit more interview-y, where we had set up questions. Tonight's going to be a little bit more of a conversation, in more of a organic sense. Wayne is really used to me just going on tangents. Wayne is in all of my dance classes right now. So I just want to start off with, there's lots of places that we could start.
Oh, yeah.
But so I'm gonna start with like a weird question.
Okay.
Not a weird question, like it is 100%.
It's probably a question you've asked me before.
Yeah. But I want to kind of hear about, because I think something that is hard to make clear, but like what are, I'm trying to figure out how to word this exactly. So you make music,
Yes.
you paint,
Yes.
you preserve dead animals.
Oh boy, do I.
Oh yeah. So like how, so for my first question is like, how do you gather materials? How are those things, like what is that process? Not just for the taxidermy.
Yes.
But as I mean, can I break it to the audience that you're poor?
uh you uh you gonna break it to me too?
Um,
I literally my card literally got declined today. So that's no secret, but
but I want to know sort of what is your process of getting around, because poverty in general is it's more than just like financial situation, but I want to start with sort of that kind of material aspect. So how does gathering material and making, like physically making things, change when you're broke?
um so I'm trying to think of where to start. Like with what section of what I do. Because to be perfectly honest, I think within like the taxidermy sphere, not much would change with how I collect materials if I was rich. Um, just because I work with a lot of roadkill. Um, and you do not have to have money to pick something up off the side of the road. I would like to say, in case there's any big government agencies out there, everything I do is legal.
You
I'm
say
not
legal or
picking up
illegal?
not picking up any super endangered hawks or something. But yeah, I work with a lot of roadkill. Um I the other day a neighborhood cat brought me a mouse, which was very sweet. Um I also have gotten sort of a reputation within the neighborhood. Um so occasionally my neighbors bring me dead animals that they find. The other day I opened up the door to a very goth teenager who had a bag with a dead mouse in it for me, which was very sweet, very kind. Um, so the like collecting of animals is relatively inexpensive. It's free for the most part. But then all of my other supplies, I go to Goodwill to find a lot of knickknacks and frames and the such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think in general that's relatively inexpensive. Um, but with like music and oh my, this is exactly what I was talking about. My dog must leave the room right now. Okay, Cinnamon, I hear you.
Oh, no.
This can be our dog chat time because I
They
hear
do enjoy chatting with each other.
Hector in the background. Okay, Cinnamon, you may leave. Don't come back. Thank you. Love him, but okay. Let's return. So with things like art, I reuse a lot of canvases because those are expensive.
How do you like? Okay, I don't know anything about that. How do you reuse a canvas?
I just paint right over it.
Perfect.
Yep. I say, well, I'm done with this one. Let me just cover it up. What's harder is with like instruments. Because I don't know if you know this, but instruments cost money.
Shocking.
So I think every instrument I've gotten has been off Craigslist.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is fine. Perfectly good instruments. But there's a lot of things I can't do. Like I can't afford to fix the action on my banjo, for one. So I just hope that it'll be fine forever. And I guess I utilize a lot of like the free resources out there. I'm part of a lot of groups, at least in my town, that are like zero waste and buy nothing groups. So when people are getting rid of things, I take them because I like them and I would like to use them.
Okay, so you just brought up something for me that pre-pandemic, when I was still living in Vermont, I kind of knew, and also I was living in Vermont in a college town with people that I knew. So this isn't always, an easy thing. But like the concept of like communal art making,
Mm-hmm.
where I would pay someone to be in my work by either feeding them or being in their work.
That's true. You did feed me sometimes.
Yes. um and so like have you ever had experiences like that where you're kind of trading services for
I definitely feel like it. I feel like at least when I would play gigs with the band, um I spoiler alert, we did not make any money. We made very little money as far as musicians go. Uh but we would usually get our drinks for free.
Okay, yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's a pretty like standard music thing, but I feel like I'm gonna get called out for this probably by one of the guys. I definitely never paid my band members. Oops.
Okay, we
I
officially
mean, with money,
with
with
money.
I pay them with love from my heart, and the fact that we were supposed to go to a group meal with all of the tips we made from shows, but we never did
I,
because
I'm
we.
gonna call Michael and Evan and out you.
Oh, I'm pretty sure Evan might be outing me right now.
Oh, good. Okay, good. As long as that's happening, you're being
I'm being canceled
good.
currently.
Good. You deserve it. Okay, so and I also we're gonna be completely honest. I kind of want to bring up something really quick. Is that both of us? We have like really specific sort of experiences with being poor and making art.
That's true.
Like first off, a lot of my adult art making was in rural Vermont.
Yep,
Um,
that's. I will say cheers to that.
yeah. So first off, making art in rural Vermont is actually cheaper. I'm gonna be real. At least on my end. Studio space, I paid $15 an hour.
You
Uh,
you pay
for
$15 an hour for studio space?
yeah. Whereas anywhere else, that's $50 to $100 an hour. So that was really like that in and itself was really easy. Bennington, Vermont also, I do. Okay, this is something we'll come back to as well. I do a lot of site. Oh, used to do a lot of site specific work.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to pay to be in the woods and dance.
That's
You
true.
don't have, yeah, you don't have to pay to be in your house making a dance film.
So true.
Which we'll come
Wait,
back.
no, you have to pay rent to be in your
You have to
house.
pay rent, but to say that, like, first off, um, oh, good, Evan is calling you out right as we speak.
I
In the chat.
knew that. I knew that.
Good. I'm good. Thank you, Evan. But also, not, so for me, a lot of my experience as an adult artist
Mm-hmm.
is making art in a rural setting where there were options to just not pay for things. Also, at the time, I was working with college artists, so I wasn't making any money off of my art. So again, I was paying them with food. Usually, I'd make them dinner. Also, and then before that was making art in school. So that in and of itself was expensive, but I wasn't paying for studio space every week. That's
Right.
so there's a different. I think also the being an artist in a college is a very specific sort of financial situation. So I just want to point that out. Also, like there's so many other factors that go into experience with poverty that we're just not going to be able to touch on tonight.
That's true because
Yeah. We're both queer, which is a thing.
right.
But we're both white.
That's
Um,
true.
so like I just want to kind of preface this, like there is a lot of things that we're going to talk about that are our own experiences and are in no way, shape, or form uh, covering
I would like to speak for everyone in the entire world
who's
personally.
ever been poor.
As a white person, I think I can do that. That's a lie.
So
No
yeah,
one.
like as we're talking about this, I just like wanted to point that out. Because something I was gonna kind of bring up again in regards to site specific work is
Mm-hmm.
being somewhere that's rural. It was so much easier to adapt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Like,
that makes sense.
um, because when I got back to Tacoma, I found that space, like not just rehearsal space, is more expensive, but finding somewhere to do a site specific work um, that wouldn't be outside of someone's business, that wouldn't require a permit, that's a lot harder. So being somewhere like rural Vermont, and you could just go to a local park or into the woods or onto our college campus. Those are things that adaptability was a lot easier at that time. Less so now. We're also in a pandemic. So I will talk
I
about
mean, there.
making, yeah, but making like cheap, not cheap as in bad, but like making art cheaply now is completely different.
That's true.
Um, but I wanted to ask, like, did you ever find yourself adapting what you were making to the space that you were at?
Well, I just graduated. Just
Yeah,
graduated, came home in a pandemic,
exciting.
found a job,
J-
um, and I feel like it's I feel like one I can't play gigs anymore. Not that I played that many beforehand, but I have felt like it was always a lot easier for me to find gigs in Vermont. Um it's just because I felt like it was easier to connect there.
Why do
Um
you think that is? Do you think it's pandemic? Do you think just
I think
fewer
it's a little
people?
pandemic, but it's a lot small town seeing the same people all of the time
Yeah.
and being regulars at a place.
Yeah.
And like right now, I'm just gonna dox myself. I live in Austin, the live music capital of the world.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that it is easy to get a gig here. Like it's really it's everything is really about connection.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and so I have minimal connections here, whereas in like Vermont, it was a lot easier because okay, you go to the same bar every weekend
Yeah.
and, and
I mean,
everyone knows everyone and you can just be like, "Hey, can I play here?"
yeah, I also think it's really important to point out that we were in one of the smallest towns.
That's really true. Like I regularly it's so funny because I regularly would drive like 20 minutes outside of town. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
using quotes. I don't know why because it literally was outside of town. I would be in a different town in 20 minutes. And now I drive for 20 minutes and I'm in the same place and it is still just as the same.
Well, I know that I could also bank on novelty. There wasn't a lot of like live performance of like happening live like physical performance if that
Right,
makes
right.
sense. Outside of the campus. So hosting like dance performances in downtown Bennington, Vermont was more of a novelty. Um, Whereas, and this isn't like a bad thing, Tacoma and Washington are very saturated with performing arts. And I think that's awesome. And there's people who are making like really incredible work that like I could not make. Um, so I can't bank on that as much anymore.
No, yeah, it's like you lose your special card. I like
Yeah.
sit here and I'm like, oh, everyone's a freak. They can all do what I do. Okay. Like, great.
That actually, so that brings up something that
That
I
I'm a
struggle with.
freak.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Um, um, my question for you, because something
Hmm.
that bothers, not bothers me, but is hard for me is how to market myself, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I have no marketing skills. I I really I feel like I don't know how to I feel like I just want to hand it off to someone else. Like I really just want to hand it off to like one of my friends and be like, "Here, send my art into the world." But
Mm-hmm,
I would want to pay a friend to do that, which
mm-hmm.
I can't. And I also don't know, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know what I'm worth. I mean, I know in the like spiritual sense, like, oh, But like as an artist, I don't know. I don't want to undersell myself, but I feel guilty asking for too much. And I don't want to take up space in places where I'm not supposed to be. And I don't want to there's so many things that I'm just like I don't really know how to. And sometimes I just feel like a nuisance. Like when I'm on my like 10th like, oh, subscribe to my Patreon and
I'm trying to like in regards to something like Patreon, because that's something that really is one, asking for money is difficult, first and foremost, but something that's really important for me personally is how do I make that art worthwhile for the people who are donating?
mm-hmm.
Um, because I'm going to be completely honest, without them, the work wouldn't be getting made in the same way. Something that I want to come back to is the concept of time and how that's something else to come back to. But so I know that's an issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
You're good.
I I'm trying to figure out how to word this exactly. Like how do I make the work worthwhile for them? How do I I don't know how to communicate that specifically, because to me there is an immense amount of sort of guilt for just saying thank you is never enough. Um
Well, I don't know what it was like for you growing up, but like in my family, it's like no one asks for help. No one,
yes.
like unless you really like direly need it,
Yes.
you do not ask for help. You can offer help, but you cannot ask for it. And
Real.
it's like I always feel like even like when I'm on like posting on Patreon or posting on anything or just showing people my work or asking for money for my work, like if I'm trying to sell something, I always feel like there's like part of me that it's like I shouldn't I shouldn't need that. Like I should just I also just want to give it away. I also just
That's real. And I'm gonna kind of slide back into the concept of like time, because Patreon
oh
is
yeah.
something that for me, um, that element
Mm-hmm.
like gives me more time to work on my art.
Mm-hmm.
So the money that I make off of Patreon not only helps me pay for costuming and sort of the material elements of making work, but it also is, I mean, I'm not making enough to be doing art full time, but it's that extra addition where if a paycheck is a little smaller this month, like I'm not needing to pick up the like that extra hour of work.
Oh no,
Um,
yeah.
and so for me, there is an like that I don't know how to explain that element, um that even just like $100 extra brings into my week. Like that gives me an hour or more, actually more than an
That is
hour.
okay. I was about to say, I know you do not make $100 an hour, so
No, I mean no.
I
I don't make
mean,
$100 a week, but like that brings in so much extra time that I would not usually have. And I think, I mean, I think we could have an entire discussion about Patreon and the way that it is viewed and its benefits and
Right.
negativity.
Completely.
There's a lot of different things, kind of with that just in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh God, where was I going exactly with that? But I feel like here's my wish. She was trying to describe this feeling. um, is that first off, Patreon in itself gives so much more access to audience as well. Um, because I can connect to audience members that aren't in my city. I can connect to audience members who otherwise would never have seen my work. There is something to be said for having that accessibility um, to audience that I think is huge. I don't know if I have a nuanced explanation.
No, but somebody does.
Um,
Someone out there, probably not someone who's watching, but someone out there right now, if they saw this, would be like, "Ugh, I can't believe you haven't read this theory on this, and this explains it."
on Patreon. But I also just mean to say that, like, not only does it give me accessibility to a larger audience in general,
Mhm.
but also I'm going to be real. Most of the people who support me on Patreon, I know personally.
That's true. I'm pretty sure I know everyone who supports me on Patreon
I mean,
personally.
I do know everyone who supports me on Patreon. And I think that honestly also comes back to connections in a way, because I am lucky enough on this one end to not only know people who can afford to donate to my Patreon and donate to my work, not just once, but every month.
Mm-hmm.
And also people who want to support that work. Um, I know, I know lots of people with Patreons who are making $25 a month. And that is extreme. That's still helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to point out that, like, I know that I'm personally lucky enough to have people who not only support me by reposting my links, but also who directly contribute to my work.
And I feel like there's something to be said about how small a contribution has to be to actually help you, especially when you're
Mm-hmm.
poor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of the materials I use aren't expensive. And so even if I'm making like $12 an extra a month, that is like 2 boxes of borax, a
Yeah.
thing of salt, a thing of like, and just knowing that, like, even just like the really little things, like you said, like sharing things, like doing
Mm-hmm.
this, like, it just, it's such a, I think it's sometimes hard for people who haven't necessarily been poor or like been in this situation to know how much, like how little can go how far.
Yeah.
And so
Um,
yeah.
oh, what are you
Oh
saying?
no, 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 go, because my brain works like half speed.
No, it's good. I just kind of wanted to bring this to another element that was also brought up by a Patreon subscriber.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I mentioned this earlier that poverty is not just like a financial situation.
True.
There's so much more to it. And like I said earlier, not something that we have any understanding of every facet of.
Mhm.
But I do kind of want to bring up the fact that there's a reason that you and I can have this conversation on YouTube. And there's a reason that we can even joke about like the theory behind it. Um, and I kind of want to talk about, and this isn't like, because aware that the reason I could, one, make dance specifically, um, is because I had opportunities
Mm-hmm.
that like other people didn't have. And like those opportunities are everything from, I live in a city where there is a public art school. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I was dancing before that. So there's also the concept that like I could be taking dance classes. Um, there's also sort of the, I'm trying to think of like how to explain, not explain, but understand my own place within being a poor artist, because like we're not the only two.
We are not actually
Crazy.
surprising. It's a really surprising.
Um and like I'm gonna be completely honest, every single artist in my life is working day jobs. Um
That's yeah, no, yeah, that I don't know a single artist who I
and
mean,
some of them, I'm gonna be real, some of them are working class, are working jobs that helps them to be financially more middle class. I know artists who are working multiple jobs, so that time we were talking about earlier is also gone. Um, I There's just like so many. Yeah. So first off, I think that we like just having this conversation is important, and kind of like bringing that up. Um, but then, oh yeah, I'm rambling now. What are your thoughts? Let me get a clearer thought.
I've got to break this down because I in my brain there's it is rambling.
Yeah, it's rambling. I'm completely
My
rambling.
brain thoughts are do 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 do. But I think you're right. It is something to be said that we do have a lot of privilege
Well, yeah,
in this, which like well, yeah. But I mean like individually it's like we have communities. We have
yeah, yeah,
how we're able to talk like this. We're able to um even having time is a privilege.
yeah.
Not one that's always afforded to us, but
Well, okay, I want to touch really quickly on like the community aspect.
yeah.
Um, because I'm gonna be completely honest, finding like finding a community in and of itself isn't always easy. Um, and like I'm trying to think of all of the like the ways that I ended up where I am now. Is hugely because of other people's work. Um, Having family members who supported me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Having community members who not only supported but like gave me opportunities and like found ways to kind of fudge around like financial standing. Um, and how like a like the access of a community being able to give access to an individual, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. I mean, like for like one of the things that stands out for me is I I don't think I ever maybe that's not true. I think it's at some point I probably would have ended up playing banjo no matter what. It's like it is there. It was calling to me. I heard it and I said, "Yes, I will play the worst instrument in the world." Um but I don't think I would have really gotten the good start that I wanted to if my banjo teacher hadn't loaned me a banjo.
Yeah.
And like one of the it's you know one of the things is like in the class requirement was like you need to provide your own instrument. And I was uh like what um and then John Kirk, the sweetest man in the entire world, was like, oh yeah, I just happen to have 4 banjos lying around. Why don't you have one?
Oh yeah. And also, I mean, so I'm thinking about like dance communities because that's what the community I'm mostly a part of is. Um, but so in my brain, I'm thinking like all of the access that I got as like a teenager, but that's
Mm,
also like that's also access in a college setting. Um,
that's true.
which there are many, many levels to even getting into a college music department. Um, especially one in a school like Bennington. Let's just be completely honest.
Yeah, let's be honest.
Which is very, very, very expensive. Very, very, very white.
Mhm.
In the middle of nowhere, it's like genuinely hard to get to.
That's
Um,
that's true.
there's
Yeah.
yeah. So like there's a lot of levels just to getting the access to even be at that school. Um, let alone then being at that school, which is, I mean, we both know like that school takes no prisoners, for better or worse, and is at times an incredibly toxic place, um, especially to like anyone who's not rich and white. Um, and that's also because not only is it expensive and it's just a toxic place, but also like the academic language, and the way that it treats students within the academic sphere, let alone the artistic sphere. um, so there's a lot going on there. Do you have any sort of insight into the music department? Because I could talk about the dance department, but I kind of want to talk about high school dance when you're done.
Oh yeah. The music department was mean to me. Uh I mean basically I I was I was told that this was in my first plan meeting. I was told that I shouldn't study music because I was a nobody on campus. I didn't have prior experience. I and when I say prior experience, I mean like I wasn't like trained in music for years before coming to college. Um, yeah. Uh, in my in the essay that I wrote, I referenced music that I create because I play 3 different instruments and I also compose music. I was told by a member of the music staff that I used the phrase my music, and they weren't sure what I was referring to because they didn't think I could make music. Um, yeah.
I'm outside of this conversation. I'm confused by what that even means.
Yeah, I wasn't. So, which I will say that I have heard that some people have wonderful experiences with the person who told me these things, but um, a lot of that I think a lot of the barrier for me was I and relating this back to being poor is I'm sure there is a way that I could have studied music for years before I got to Bennington. But frankly, I was the head of my household for most of my growing life. And I don't know if people know this, but when you are a kid trying to take care of a family, you don't really have a lot of extra time
yeah,
to explore passion projects. So it just it there's a lot of layers to why I was treated the way I was. I mean, and that's one experience within the music department. Like I said earlier, like there's obviously people who were really wonderful to me and helped me like kind of break some of that down. But it feels like because it feels like I've lost a lot of time. I mean, we keep coming back to time just because I didn't have that like extra. I didn't have time when I was a kid to develop these talents for like many reasons. And that's not to say that I had like a completely terrible childhood devoid of everything, because that's not true. But there were like these barriers that I feel like I'm still sort of playing catch up on some of those. Um, and that was, that was something that I sort of had to find. I had to find my own way within those circles. And I feel that way about like people who play music in general. And that's some of that is from me not being a cis man, and some of that's from me not having the money to enter some of these places, just because there's a lot of elitism that comes in many different forms in, I feel like, the art world in general. I mean, I was very nervous to show a lot of my work at Bennington because of that. Even before I started like really making things, just like it's and I'm still scared of a lot of like environments, like just not, I don't know. I get really torn up about elitism in a lot of different different
Well,
places.
you brought up something really interesting about like not studying for years, where I'm on sort of the opposite, where I did study dance for years. And really truly the only thing that would have kept me, and did not keep me, but would have kept me from those classes, was money.
Mm-hmm.
Like my body type is definitely something that we could talk about, and I feel like I would love to have an entire live stream like this talking about like fat phobia and the nuance of that in the dance world. But the only thing that really could have kept me from taking dance classes growing up was money, and it didn't. I was lucky enough, I taught dance all through high school. I got to I was unpaid but working in semi-professional spheres, like, and those are like opportunities that 99% of high school dancers never get. I went to a public arts high school that one didn't have to pay for, and then gave me access to even knowing that somewhere like Bennington existed. So I had in the dance realm every single opportunity that you could want or need. And I got to go to a school like Bennington, which has a huge, like hugely famous dance department.
Oh, baby.
And yeah, and my issue there was language. In all of my years in technique training and being a part of local dance scenes, where I want to be real, for the most part, other than some cattiness, like most of the dancers in Tacoma and Seattle are extremely upfront and like no nonsense. Um, and then I got to Bennington, and the academic language was a huge part of the dance world, of the dance department. And I just had no idea how to like have that. I didn't know how to describe my work in a way that felt nuanced or felt like it was getting the point across. I had no idea what people were saying to me. And this also, like, we can also talk about the fact that that's also a thing in classes. But specifically in regards to dance, I wanted to talk about how it made my body feel, the shapes I was making, the dynamics I was using, why that was, what I was choosing to use. And instead, I was so like befuddled by these concepts that I had never heard of. And I had never read an academic dance text before.
I
Um,
still haven't read an academic dance text. So
there are a lot. There are a lot. And let's be real, I have now, and I have people in my life where I can employ that language. Um, there's a lot to also say about like the imposter syndrome of acquiring academic language, where I can use it, I can converse in those kinds of circles now, but it does sort of alienate me from other people who might not have access to that, and I still feel alienated by people who've had that access their whole life. There is something to also point out that like academic language is inherently classist and racist, and it's used as a way to shut people out of academic spheres.
I mean, I feel like, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, that was just sort of my thing, is that that was the thing that really I think held me back in a lot of situations, and then I learned how to use it, but I don't think we should have to learn how to discuss art in such a specific way. I think that especially discussing an art form that is about the body, should always be accessible.
I mean, I think it's like, and that's something I'm really grateful for in your dance classes, is sometimes I don't have the words to explain, like you'll ask me, you'll be like, how did that feel for you? Or how did this, and you're never like, you never ask me some big crazy question that I'm like, oh, well, I don't know dance history, so and I feel like with anything I create, I don't see the need to be like, like when I'm doing taxidermy, I don't feel the need to be academic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not, it's not like someone's going to see an earring I made out of a squirrel's foot and be like, oh, what's the meaning behind this? Like, it's a squirrel's foot and I put it on an earring because I thought it was cool. Like, I feel like I, if I, if I can go on a little bit of a taxidermy rant that may or may not be 100% related.
Okay.
But I know that there's a lot of ideas about taxidermy being a low art form. It's like it's like when you ask people what they see, like, or what they imagine, like when you think about a taxidermist, there's a very specific idea. And I know that within the taxidermy community, there's a lot of people that are upset that people can't see like all the work that goes into it and all of the like I mean, it takes months to create anything because and it's just hold on, my brain just the A went to C, not to B, if that makes sense.
I'm just gonna really quickly just point out that high versus low art is a distinction that should not exist.
It should not exist. It
High art doesn't exist. Low art doesn't exist. It's 100% a distinction created to keep poor, specific poor, queer, specifically Black folks out of arts making spheres. Like, it's not something that exists. And the fact that it's something that even weighs on us is a problem, because it doesn't exist. It's a concept that is inherently wrong. But that's just my little rant.
That's just your little.
I mean, I can talk about high versus low art for days. But
I saw your face when I said that. You were like,
it's a bad distinction that has absolutely no meaning outside of separating who gets to make art.
ugh.
And how art is viewed. That's also a big question, is like, okay, so this whole conversation, I keep thinking about the last dance film that I made, which had a lot of weird constraints because we made it.
Strawberries?
Yeah, we made it in a pandemic. There was a lot of rehearsal that was just us having big, heady conversations about how tired we are. Like, like those kinds of conversations. The day of filming, I felt like was a really great day for me, because it pulled me out of my head. The person who did cinematography, Jamari, who is in the chat, is one of those people who, one of those people I kind of referenced earlier, is that like we can both have no nonsense conversations and very like nuanced critique conversations, and like they really helped me figure out like the framing of it, and all of this work went into it, and then we got to have this. The premiere of it was, I mean, first off, I was sitting at my computer. Anyone could see it because it was on Facebook. Like that made it, for the most part, accessible. Not entirely accessible. Internet access is a huge thing that is not granted to everyone. Should
be.
I mean, yeah. But like, but I would never, because that was premiered on Facebook, I would never think of that as, you know, well, Jamari says hi. Everyone should.
Hello.
They're wonderful. But to think that like there's so much went into that was structured in honesty, like an academic way. Some of it wasn't structured in an academic way. There were rehearsals where we kind of just rolled around.
We love a good roll around rehearsal.
Yeah. And we just talked about like the bodily sensations versus, you know, concepts. So, but, and that's just like a personal sort of feeling, is that not like making, like, again, just rambling.
Just let it out.
Let it out. But there's just so many sort of facets to why qualifying something as low art, even in our own heads, is damaging to art.
This little monster, this little goblin lives in there. And he says, remember everything you learned? And I say, I'm trying not to, buddy.
Well, there's also something to be said about like people who go out of their way to learn the like how like the status art to then break it, you know. And again, like that brings us back to like who gets to learn the status art or like the high art. I think I'm not going to get too like history nerd, but Jamari backed me up. I think if you're ever looking for a movement that like really does that, I think really well, kind of, and I'm definitely thinking of a specific poet that I would die for, Claude McKay. But the Harlem Renaissance does a lot of really great stuff like that too, where and I think that's just a movement that's like, as Jamari says, is the only artistic movement. But also, like, I'm just trying to think of like, I don't know, I don't think I've broken anything. I definitely think that I am, as lame as this sounds, like of a lineage. And that I don't like how that in it of itself, to be able to claim any sort of lineage is a privilege.
That's true. And there's also, wait, I had a thought. No, I don't have a thought. I thought I had a thought. it's flown away.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
Here's my thought. Here's my thought. For me to go to taxidermy school, like a traditional taxidermy school, it's a lot of money. And I'm also scared of it. I just it's a lot. But there's so many avenues that I think, because I haven't had the opportunity to go to a physical taxidermy school, pay the money, take time off of work, all of that, I've actually come out on the other side better. Because, okay, for example, next Thursday, I'm taking an online taxidermy class, which in and of itself, like, I have a computer, I have internet, that very grateful for these. But it is, it's like a it's pay as you wish sliding scale. And I'm just like thinking about how much more I can learn from being able to access all of these different spaces that are made accessible to me than I feel like if I just went the traditional route. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense here.
Yes, I have a point to make that I don't think is a point you're making, so I'm gonna let you finish your
Okay. I think that there is so much more for me to learn from other people who have extremely different experiences than me, and have also either are currently in the same boat that I am in financially or whatever, or have been at some point, than any of the like verified fancy, I say fancy, like, I could go get my official taxidermy certificate in 6 weeks from, I'm not going to drop any school names. None of y'all are getting that out of me. They can have all my money and all of that stuff. But I feel like I will not learn as much from a person who profits off of that than a person who knows what it's like to be in our situation as artists and is willing to help other people in that boat, Does
I
that
agree.
make sense?
It
Okay.
does. It makes sense to me. And I'm gonna agree, and then also disagree a little bit.
You're going to disagree. Tell me this.
Not because I think that like institutions are better learning environments. I actually disagree with that statement. But I do think you brought up something for me where the concept of the struggling artist, I think, is a lot more insidious than people give it credit for. Um, and I think that there's a lot of valorizing someone who has struggled and still made art when there are plenty of people who are struggling and either don't have the time or the energy to make art.
Okay, yes, that is a great point.
um, and I also think that there's something to say about, instead of, because like as our system is now, we have the institutionalized version of art, we have communal art, we have individual sort of outside of the institution, whatever that looks like, and they're separated. And I think that because there is so much like valorizing of you have to struggle to be a great artist kind of thing, is also used in a way to like make denial of artists from various spaces like a valid thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can still be dealing with poverty, dealing with um ableism, like all these racism, all these different things, but that struggle makes your art better. Um, and I don't know if I'm making my point clear that like we should be aiming to
Mm-hmm.
end those systems, um, and also end the system that is keeping artists, using that as like a general,
A general, it's an
out,
overarching term. There's so many things that are art.
yeah, out of different spaces because of like the valorizing of struggle.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. And I'm not going to disagree with that because it actually is a good point. But I do think there's something for me personally
Yeah.
that I find comfort in knowing that artists that I'm working with or learning from
Mm-hmm.
are going to understand at least some of my personal struggle,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah, because I think
able
just
to
like,
accommodate that, which like you are incredible at, like as my dance teacher at making your classes accessible and and accommodating me if I have whatever, uh whether it's monetary, whether it's mental health, whether it's like physical, all of those things, and I find so much like joy in being able to have that connection where I know that that's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, and I think that like having, coming back to like having a community and being able to have a community, whatever that looks like, is so important because I feel the same way about specifically finding queer artists. Um, you know,
Mhm.
like, and not saying that everyone has to be making art in the same way and it should all be institutionalized. That's not what I'm saying. Um, but I think that we should be aiming to amplify voices and artistic voices outside of the institution so
I
that they
agree. Yeah.
can, yeah, they can reach more people. I don't know how to do that specifically, um, other than, I mean, in my experience, social media has been the way that I've found uh, local artists, artists that I wouldn't have found, in school. Um, I don't have a nuanced sort of,
I mean, I feel like I find so many people just by word of mouth,
yeah.
and
Uh,
that's free. I don't know if y'all knew that. You can talk for free. Some of y'all shouldn't, but maybe
wow,
I shouldn't, but but you can.
wow. Um, but yeah, so that's sort of my it's not like it's not. I'm not saying what you said is wrong.
Listen, I
Like,
can be wrong. As
no, but because I totally agree with you. I also think that there's so many ways that we, I think, make certain situations for artists okay.
Yeah, and I think I don't always know how to do that, even though I'm in a position, I mean, a relatively privileged position, but one where I'm like still, I just want, I don't always know how to, hold on. See, this is what I'm talking about. I should not be allowed to speak for free. I think that, I think that we have a lot of work to do, but I don't always know how to do that work. And
Well, yeah.
sometimes I
I mean,
struggle. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
that's why we're trying to have these conversations and then have
Right.
feedback from these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. And I sometimes struggle with um prioritizing myself versus prioritizing the needs of other artists, and I don't know, I can't always make the distinction where I sometimes I definitely put too much of my energy into you know working for other people, and then I'm like, oh, I have no, I can feel it like physically taxing on myself, which is there's a whole lot to be said there about like fatigue, and I'm speaking like specifically about like supporting other artists, like specifically artists. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I can pour so much time and energy into, and money into, buying from artists or promoting other people's work and things like that. And then sometimes I'm like, am I slacking on my own end? And then sometimes I spend too much time in my own work and I'm like, well, now like I've spent all this time on myself where I could have been, it's like I don't know how to balance it. I don't know how to, because I think I deserve some level of vanity about what I'm doing, about the work that I make. But then at the same time, I'm like, there, I should be doing more for other artists.
Well, I think that there's something to be said. I know that my personal experience, the concept of like grind culture and like gotta be promoting myself. I gotta be
Yeah.
like making sure everyone knows I've made this thing, I'm making this thing. And in my brain it's like, oh, if I tweet out someone else's work that I like, that's enough. But I think for me personally, the times that I've had where I've been able to actually engage with someone else's work, whether it's reading a friend's writing, or watching a friend's stream and like actually participating in it, and that's not the same as promotion, I totally
Oh
understand.
yeah.
um but how, like, I feel like for me personally, I want to engage with more people's work on an actually like meaningful level,
Hmm.
instead of just demanding others do that for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, I don't know if you have more to say about that.
No.
Okay. I think part of that goes with I personally feel this, and I feel like I know a lot of other people that feel this, is this pressure to commodify your work for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Either to, sell work because you have to,
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, I can't afford to make this art unless I'm also selling the art.
Yeah.
Or um, even just like this notion that I know, even just personally, like speaking with members of my family, I'm like, oh, well, like they'll ask like, oh, how's banjo going? And I'm like, oh, it's going great. And they're like, have you booked any gigs? Or like, I'll say something like, oh, I'm working on an album soon, which is true. I am. I mean, okay, I know every musician says they're working on an album, and then like 7 years pass and they're like, here's a single I made. But I legitimately, okay, you can call me out on this, but like legitimately am working on an album. And and the idea that like, I tell this to people and they're like, oh, well, I hope it does well so you can, like you can make money off of it and things like that. And it's like this pressure that sort of like seeps into me, like, oh, like, great, now I feel pressure for this to do well in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I make art that is just for me, for
Mm-hmm.
without worrying about any sort of monetary value
Mm-hmm.
of it. And part of that is, if I made enough money to make art for fun, which I do make art for fun, but there's
Mm-hmm.
always like, I feel like there's always this pressure of having to not necessarily sell the things I make, but sort of sell the idea of me as.
Well, what, like, I think there's a lot of like traditional success markers
Hmm.
that may or may not be easy to hit. What those success markers are, I think, differs a little bit now because of one pandemic, but also like the world that we're making art in. I know dance is really trying to figure out how to be in a world of social media. And so for a lot of dance people, it's how many subscribers to your, Instagram, not subscribers, followers to your like dance Instagram. Subscribers, I sound 100.
Remember to like and subscribe below. I did that for you so that you didn't have to worry about
it.
Thanks. No problem.
But there's like, I think traditional success markers are changing, but that is also to say that like I think there's also something where, as I was listening to you talk, my thought was, well, I feel the best when someone I respect likes my work. But also you can't pay people in respect.
That's true.
I also don't want to just act like I'm like, well, you shouldn't pay artists, because that's also not true.
That's not true. Art is work.
Yeah. And I don't want to be like, well, I give my friends my respect of their art, but that's not putting food on their table. So like I think that balance of, not balance, but like having an understanding that I think grind culture isn't great, and not like hustle culture, and the way that we have to continuously market ourselves is not great for our mental health. I also think that, especially as artists who have either grown up poor or still poor, need to not only thoughtfully engage with work, other people's work, but also like help to like I don't know. There's just so many layers, and that's a cop out. I just say I don't know. But
yeah, my therapist hates it when I say that.
Because I want to be working to get other artists access and money. But I also don't want to put it on to other people that you should be marketing yourself,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm trying really hard to say I don't know what to do.
I don't know.
Because there's so many people doing exactly what we're talking about. It's not just us being, I don't know how to do that. And maybe engaging with the kind of art that someone is making, because those all art forms, like their individual communities differ so much. I won't lie, I have no idea how to promote music.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know either. Post funny little pictures on my Instagram. Sometimes I let the dudes take the reign. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Evan, it's your turn.
Real. Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of deeper conversation that has to be happening, not necessarily just with audiences. Like I think understanding your audience is a huge element. That's something that I'm coming to learn with my Patreon, more so than sort of just releasing a dance thing into the void, but also like having an understanding of like the needs of other artists is really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have thoughts on how to support artists, comment below.
Please. I don't want to hear none of y'all's thoughts that are political, because I already know that I could be a great artist if I was getting basic income and I had health care.
Well, I mean, that's also something to be said, is that, let's be honest, like artists are, I think, inherently no art is non-political.
That's
and
got me there.
basic support for human beings is the absolute first step. Not even kind of close to the last step. And that's just in general, not just in making art. And that comes back to, I think everything that we touched on with like time. Like there are so many artists who just don't have the time to be making the thing because they're working.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say because people are working jobs, people are engaging in direct action, people are raising families. Like there's so much more than just being, sorry, there's so much more than just being a single person who's, trying to make art. There's a lot more factors into what.
And it's not always about time. We've talked a lot about time, but it's also about energy. It's also, if you're a person who works 8 hours a day and you come home and you're not you're not always physically able. Especially if you have anything else going on in your life.
Yeah.
It's I think it goes back to like what you were talking about, like grind culture. It's like this idea of like people are always like, we'll wake up an hour earlier and write a chapter every morning, or like wake up and spend this time doing that, or what if on your lunch break you did this, or if you well, frankly, I sleep on a lot of my lunch breaks because I'm exhausted for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and let's be honest, we haven't even touched on mental illness at all.
Oh, buddy.
That, like, even if you are inspired and you're ready to work, Damari just said again, literally everything is political, and you are correct. But oh god, what was I saying? There was oh yeah, we haven't even touched on mental illness, that like that in and of itself can take away energy and time and capability, like accessibility to other people. Like there's a lot that even just mental illness can do.
Which I think you talked about that a little bit on your last stream.
We talked a lot about like the rest element.
Yeah, the rest element of it.
That so much of the art that we were making now, we didn't have the energy to be making grand statements. We were making art as a form of self-care, which I also like is not and spoon theory. Thank you, Jamari. Yeah, I mean, this entire thing that we're talking about right now could be an entirely separate, but I think incredibly important element of dealing with poverty also is that most people who are in poverty do not have access to mental health care, let alone physical health care. Again, back to basic needs being covered. But even then, just, I mean, yeah, again, sort of tying the last live stream, what we've been talking about, Jamari's comments. One thing that I think it was Simone who pointed out was that she didn't have the energy to make political art. Every day she was engaging with it, specifically as a Black woman. That when she came home and wanted to dance, she wanted to dance for herself. And I do think that all art is political, and I think even that is a political statement. And that's only taking in, like, yeah. That wasn't a full sentence. I apologize.
No, I know what you're saying. And hopefully other people know what you're saying too.
Yeah, tonight's been very rambly from me. And I think also because there is no way that I can encapsulate every experience.
Oh,
Of
absolutely
making
not. Like
work.
we have very limited experiences.
Yes. Limited and for the most part, very actually not for the most part, entirely very privileged.
Yeah.
Like, but I just think that trying to think of like a way to encapsulate all of the rambling I just did about
Yep.
mental illness. But okay, so going back to Jamari's comment about spoon theory, which I won't do a deep dive into spoon theory, but the idea that okay, you're dealing with mental illness, and if work is accessible, you're working 8 hours, and then you're supposed to have the energy, like the emotional energy, not just even physical energy, to continue making work and engaging. I know for a fact, and like there are many nights when I've talked to you, I've talked to my partner Otto, Jamari, that like that desperate want to create and just like it just can't come out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I think how do I word this? I no, that's not what I want to say.
No.
No, I don't agree with what I was what I was
No.
thinking. Um,
See, this is what I like about you is like sometimes you think before you speak,
not always.
and I
Not
have
always.
to backtrack.
Most
So
of the time, I don't think before I speak, and then I make a fool of myself.
here's to that.
But yeah, so I don't know how to neatly tie this conversation up in a bow, you know?
I
Um,
think it's hard because we've talked about a lot, but there's also a lot of things that we haven't talked about at all.
well, and the thing is that we talked about a lot of things, but in an hour and a half, each thing that we've touched on, we haven't even given it the time that each element can take and deserves.
Mm, oh yeah, because I mean, we personally spend so much time just talking to each other where we'll like look at the clock and we'll be like, oh, 45 minutes have passed and we are
Yeah.
nowhere further along in the conversation
No,
when we started.
exactly.
And that's just because there's so much to say about literally everything.
Yeah, and also we're two people.
We are
Um,
two people.
we're two people, and we can bring in the voices that we've heard, but
But
like,
we cannot be the voices.
yeah. Um, and so yeah, I would love to hear people's feedback, positive, negative, neutral, just any thoughts that came up. Um, because yeah, we've touched on a lot, and we've also touched on nothing.
Yes.
Yeah,
That is yes.
yeah. Wonderful. Any sort of last thoughts? I almost said last words, and that sounded ominous.
I please don't kill me. I don't I the idea of last words is so nerve-wracking. What if I choose the last like the wrong ones?
You're gonna say frogs.
Frogs.
Perfect. Okay, with that, um, I am going to. I've linked Wayne's Patreon in the comments. Go subscribe. See some dead animals. Um, they're really cool.
I love them.
Thank you guys. Wayne, where can we find you on social media?
Oh, okay. So if you want to see dead things, you
Mm-hmm.
can go to Dead Frog Dreams, all one word all together on Instagram. My band Instagram is at Sheepdog Band. My band is Sheepdog and the Wise Men, which you can find on Bandcamp. And that is not just me, that is me, and it is Evan and Michael, who are very beautiful, wonderful human beings who I literally love with my entire heart and I miss with my entire heart. And Evan is probably going to like call me gay in the comments or something like that. And that's fine because I stand by what I said.
Well, it's also not incorrect.
It's also completely true.
Awesome. You guys can find me at Daphne's Performance on Instagram. That's also my Patreon if you are so inclined. Thank you to all of my patrons. I think most of you guys are in the chat, and Wayne is also included in that. And
I'm also a patron. We trade the same money back and forth every
we
month.
do. So thank you guys so much and have a great night.